Hello, it's not yet 4 o'clock, but close to it, so time to interview Emilie Autumn, Gothic phenomenon from America, spreading the plague in Europe.
Well done.
Successfully so.
And don't worry, because it's always 4 o'clock at some time in the world, so
Yes,
it's always tea time. Tea time.
I'd like to start with some pretty general questions. So the Victorian age, that's your thing really, isn't it?
The thing is, it hasn't always been. Some years ago, I was completely enamored and obsessed with all things Elizabethan, and the thing is, just as my life progressed, I seem to be going through the various eras and finding what is relevant. The only reason I really care about that, I'm a big history geek and all of the rest of it, but I find the reason it's interesting to me is that I find the things that are relevant to now, what's personally relevant and also just socially relevant, and not everybody might get exactly what I'm talking about at the time, but I think a lot of people do. And the thing about Victorian is we're actually not doing what some people might assume, which is glorifying that age and saying, oh, how beautiful. We're not. We're actually saying it was pretty damn awful. And especially if you're a girl, good luck. Suicide was pretty much the best option that you could do at that time because it was horrible. And in general, just it was also, though, the start of the Industrial Revolution, which is also just kind of a nice joke if that's the kind of music you make. And so the whole start of things electric, of factory, of mass produced, which definitely has an effect on our entire life. It's not individual handmade anymore. And also, in particular interest to me is it was virtually the start of all sort of medicine as we know it now, away from the folk remedies, all of the more natural things, to where the psych wards, as you know, like that's what the show is about. Basically, the whole kind of point to me is that it started then. It's the comparison and almost the social criticism, to sound like ridiculously pompous, between the situations at the time, the psych wards especially for girls, and the ones now, which I've had my personal experience in, and kind of balancing them and saying, not a lot has changed, and that's not okay. So that's really what it's about. It's a bit of the horror story between then and now, and how it's really not that far apart. It wasn't that long ago, and that's the fascination, is the relevance to now, really.
Okay, so you're a history geek and a literature freak, apparently, as well, because there's a lot of literature in your text.
Yeah.
Do you still read a lot?
I do. It's more difficult when we're on the road and we get literally 2 hours to sleep. Everything else is work, and that's it. But when I do actually go home, that's what I do most of the time. Yeah.
You said you used to be interested in the Elizabethan age before the Victorian one.
Yeah.
On Enchant, there's a lot more Shakespeare presence than...
And the thing is, actually on Opheliac, I mean, the title and everything was my play on the word of combining the character of Ophelia with an actual disease, like an insomniac or all of those things. So it's creating a medical term out of a sort of archetype of a particular kind of girl, but it also extends to boys. I mean, this is about them too. But it's personal to me as a lady. And so the whole thing on Opheliac is basically that Shakespearean tale of that as applies to a general type. And that's what that's about. But also on Enchant, it was very much about that as well, in a different thing. And it's kind of relevant, and I haven't even really thought about that before you said so, is that the Shakespearean theme is not just now, which is very much a part of this. It was also then, and I think what that really says is exactly that of, look how much we are still completely influenced by all things Shakespearean through these completely different in every way ages that I've gone through, but also history has gone through since the time that stuff was written. And I know in 500 years from now, somebody's going to be doing the same thing and being completely influenced by that, finding the archetypes that he wrote about, because virtually every type of human being, every personality type has an archetype laid out in there, because he was just that good and that thorough about representing all of humanity. And yeah, that's fascinating. I think that the fact that I could do an album pretty much heavily inspired by those types of people then and now, being influenced by completely different eras, and I still can't get off the topic. And it seems like nobody else can, because I've heard several times that directors like Spielberg and everybody has sat down and said at one point or another that there is no story, no Hollywood script, nothing that was not in some way based on a Shakespearean story or a character type. That in every way, he basically told all the stories, and everything now is still influenced by that type of story that he laid out, which is pretty amazing.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
There's nothing I could do that could ever be that important, and I accept that with all humility.
When you look back at Enchant in the musical aspect, I mean, do you see it as an experiment or a transitional stage?
It was definitely a transitional stage. I think Opheliac is a lot more experimental in that way because I learned so much previously. The thing about Enchant and why I don't perform any of those songs right now is I'm proud of the songwriting. I know that, in my opinion anyway, that was solid, good songwriting. I'm proud of the musicianship on it. The recording production quality leaves a bit to be desired because it was recorded in very sparse, like, third world country conditions, and I did the most of it in my bedroom. But, and it was very sincere and very heartfelt. And the thing is, I almost don't want to misrepresent it by putting it in the shows now, because it is what it was at that time. The only reason why I stay away from it is really because I changed so much, more than I ever thought I would. And not to get morbid or anything, but I think the thing is, once you're locked up in an insane asylum or anything like that, you're never the same again. And it's very, very hard to go back to before. And so that changed literally everything about me, how I am, how I act, how I think, literally, because once you're put on so many drugs, then your brain doesn't work the same way anymore. I mean, my thought process, my memory completely changed. And musically, there's actually a lot of similarities. There's a lot that actually did stay the same, more than I think some people realize. But in all the emotional aspects of my life, all of it, the way I deal with the outside world, the kind of fantasy world that I almost had to create out of being locked up, having nowhere to go, you're not let out, and having to escape into something, that's what this is all born out of. And it's essentially a sort of ironic, humorous take on the story, on the true story, because if you can't make fun of that, you're just going to die, because you can't actually live with the reality that that was so horrible. So at some point you've got to find the ridiculous, sarcastic humor in it, or else there's just seriously no way to carry on. So the thing about Enchant is I have a feeling that as I progress in just my own self, I could potentially in some years get back to that fairy part of me that sees the dark side but has that little light of optimism at the end, which is what I don't really have now. I do, but it's a different way. And the fans actually gave me that optimism, is their understanding of it. Opheliac, I never assumed that anybody would listen to. I didn't know who, if anyone, would listen to it. It was completely done in private for me because it had to come out, and that essentially tells the truth of everything. And knowing that Enchant, I want to honor that when it comes back. I think I might get to that healthier place in my life where I can wear the wings again and really sincerely feel that bit of brightness. So I think it'll happen, but I'm just not there yet. So I want it to be fair and right when I do.
Okay.
Thank you. I know I talk a lot, I'm sorry.
No,
I
that's
always
good.
do this. Yeah, I just go off on tree branch. It's like the tree trunk and all these branches that go off from there, and I usually end up back to the trunk form where it all started. Sometimes I don't, and I just forget the question, so feel free to stop me anytime I just go on too long.
The more you talk, the happier I am.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's very kind.
You express a lot of your personal feelings and views in your music. Is that self-evident for you, or?
Yeah, it's actually almost a decision that I made since the Enchant era, and just being, I mean, it came out a bit later, but I was very, well, relatively like 17, 18, 19 when that was made, and some of that material was when I was 14 and onwards, so it represents a very different time for me. What essentially changed is the desire and the kind of psychopathic need to tell the truth. And that was something I always tried to hide behind a sort of mask of what I wanted to be, or what I wanted people to think I was, or what I wanted the world to be. And it was the honest, just like being blasted down to earth that the world is not what I wanted it to be. Nothing is what I wanted it to be. I am not what I wanted to be. And definitely people's opinion of me was not what I wanted it to be. And so just being able to finally get the courage to say, fuck all of that, I'm going to tell the truth for once. And once I started doing that, musically and in all the rest of the parts of my life, looking the way I wanted, doing whatever the fuck it was, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. I'm not out to piss people off. I'm not out to fuck with anybody. That it became a compulsive need to keep doing the same and to keep telling more of the truth. And in the book that I wrote that is almost out, that's where you get everything. There's almost nothing left. I think any human being still will have that mystery, and there will always be new things and new secrets to tell, or not. But in that, basically everything is out, and that it's sort of, you start that and it becomes an addiction to just free yourself. And as hard as that sometimes is, in general it feels pretty good. And I think that's why we get any response at all, is because people know that I'm telling the truth and it's sincere.
I think people often feel the need to do the same, but
absolutely, it's
I'm
not. I'm not
point
special in that. I just have the luxury of having an outlet that I can be loud about it, because I'm behind a microphone, because I can write songs about it and have that be what pays my rent, and write books and the rest of it. That's an absolute luxury. I've worked hard to make that, but I don't take it for granted. It's a luxury that I'm able to use that for, and basically that's what I do with my life. So I'm very, very lucky in that way, that I just get to do it all the time now. It wasn't always that way.
We were wondering, when exactly will we find your book in the stores?
It will be soon. There are a few things that happened, and I'm going to be completely honest with you, which that has been a very difficult subject, because I know that a lot of the fans who have been waiting for it for almost 2 years now have been very disappointed with the fact that it keeps being delayed. And there were two things that essentially happened. One in that time, and one very, very, very recently, as in just weeks ago. The first thing was that it's a true story, and it is the story behind the Asylum, of how it was started, of what it means. It's that time-traveling alternate reality kind of horror novel, but that's very true. And also it's my personal diaries from when I was locked up inside the asylum and only had a crayon to write with, because you're not allowed to have pens or pencils, because anything you have, your shoelaces, a bracelet, they think you're going to kill yourself with. So because it's true, because, I never really named names, but I use initials and the rest of it, and just the description of places, of what hospital it is, all of that implicates things that people probably don't want to be talked about. So the first thing that happened and kept things back for a while was the thing is that I found the hard way, that if you write something that's actually true, there are always going to be people that do not want that to come out. So that was a difficult thing. I was able to completely fix it. I didn't have to change anything. And so that is solved, and there's no longer a problem. It's bigger than any album I could ever possibly make. And it's the most important thing in my life, that fucking book. And the day that it comes out will literally be the first day of my life. Everything before that is rehearsal leading up to it. So very soon, I cannot give you an exact date. All I can say is check the forum. That's the first place anyone will know, and it will be very, very soon. And included as an extra special treat to say thank you to everybody for being so patient with me and waiting for it, is that, the book is huge and massive and very graphic, and so I hope that will be worth it in itself, but I've also recorded the audiobook version of it, which is like 6 massive, it's long discs of the whole thing being narrated. You get to hear me being the talking rats, the leeches, the doctors, myself, everything. It's ridiculous. And that will come with it, just as an extra something to say thanks.
Fans will die for that.
I hope not literally,
I hope not
but
literally, but
I hope that they enjoy it, and I hope, what I think is that they'll understand me much better than, and I think I already have a great deal of understanding and compassion. I'm very grateful for that among the fan base. It's something I never ever expected that I would ever get. And the amount of acceptance I feel from the outside in my own life is massive. And yeah, I'm very, very, I don't take that for granted at all. But I think once that comes out, they'll get all the bits that they really had no idea and that I couldn't really talk about before. It was a very scary thing to do. And I think in that, people that have had similar experiences will hopefully find the compassion on that end, in that, yeah, try not to kill yourself, try not to take all your sleeping pills, try not to cut yourself to death, try not to get locked up, but should you be bipolar or manic depressive, or, which is the same thing, or just clinically depressed, or be having a really fucking bad day, that's okay. There is some help. It might not be from the places you think, and even if there's not help, there's understanding. And I think the judgment that I experienced of those situations was absolutely brutal, and that's what almost killed me the second time, is people's horribly cruel reactions to those things. And it's when you need people the most to be kind to you and to understand what is really going on, and when they just don't. And so I would like people, because I'm not special, this is a very common thing for people to be in that situation. I mean, there's a reason why psych wards across the world are filled with people, you know, it's not just me. And I think the system needs to change massively. That's the thing, it's very Victorian in a very bad way. It has not changed. That's essentially what I'm talking about. That's why all of this and the references to it. And I really hope that people find a sort of self-acceptance so that they don't get ruined by the judgment that will inevitably come. You would be absolutely shocked, unless you've done it yourself, of how cruel people can be when you try to commit suicide. You would think that there would be some understanding of it, why that might have happened, or an attempt to try, and there's not. Even among your closest friends or lovers or whatevers, it's dealt with in general, I found in my own life, very, very harshly. And I just want people to know that, if anything, I understand. And I think a lot of people understand. And I think just that sort of subconscious community of helping ourselves, even when nobody else will, we've got to get stronger in that. And that's all I'm really trying to share in the show and otherwise.
It's something that scares people, so they try to shut it out.
That is absolutely what I'm talking about. And I know that people act out of fear, and I understand it, but it's still not right, and it still has to change. And I think a general understanding of mental conditions, it is so very possible to create a healthy environment to help people that need help. And being locked up in these places, I found that doesn't exist. I'm sure that somewhere in the world are places that are better than that, but what I have seen, and in all of my research, what I have found other people's experiences to be were basically just like mine, in that I came out of there so much sicker than I was when I came in, and had to be put on so many more drugs because I couldn't stop shaking, and had post-traumatic stress disorder coming out of there, which is what people get when they come back from a war. And it's so horrifying that you can have that same thing because of what people did to you in there, and being sexually fucked with by the doctors in there, and you can't do a damn thing about it. Why? Because they're a doctor and you're a crazy girl. And so that happens so much, and I don't think people know that, and they just simply have to know it. All I want is for people to know that. That's what the whole book is for, is just to, even if they don't know the solution for it, because I may not know the solution for it, but at least know what's going on, because it's really killing people. It's very serious. I just brought the whole tone down to something. Let's talk about something happy and glorious now. I apologize.
No.
It's the truth, though, and so it's hard, again, like, not to start telling it once you start.
It's better to talk about it than not talk about it.
I think that's the main
because
problem.
that's what's been happening all along, not to talk about it.
Is that different in Europe?
No, it's the same.
That's a problem. It would be so nice to think that it was, because then there would be somewhere, because America has people think that it's this sort of arrogant, superior country. It's not. Our guilt complex is massive. We think everything's better somewhere else, and we always like to think that over there wherever that is, the grass is always greener, that everything's better, that they are more free, that they're more accepting of stuff, and to know that they're not, it's sad, but it also brings us together in a way that we can all work on something. So, yeah. We will eventually, people will get the idea and we'll take care of ourselves and each other a lot better. I have to believe that, otherwise there's no point in going on.
That's true.
Yeah.
This is for the fans after all, and well.
Yeah, and that's sweet, because I think the fans already get the idea of what we're talking about. And from talking so much to, I mean, we always try to, and I think we've only missed one or two on this tour because we had to leave quickly, but we always try to spend a lot of time talking and signing and, you know, taking pictures with and hugging the people afterwards, because it's just so important to really look into their faces and realize these are not just this faceless crowd of watchers. They're real people. We are real people. We might like to look like magical unicorn aliens, but we're not. We're just human beings, average, boring human beings like everybody else. And that is completely okay, because we're really not so boring. We're all pretty interesting people when we let ourselves be. And yeah, so being able to talk to them, I've learned so much, again, about how many people have all kinds of some which I don't have, a lot which I do, and the fact that they do feel when they come here that they get a little bit of that compassion that they might not otherwise get. And what I try to help with in any small way that I can is just so that they know that they don't have to hurt themselves. There is another way. And how is that? Through creativity, through finding some way, whether you're a musician or whatever, to express that. Because honestly, my sweet revenge has been not only to be able to just let it out and do this with my life, but also to make money off of it, to have this be what sustains me entirely, to not have to do anything else that I don't want to do, which hasn't always been the case. You know, we all have to do our shitty jobs growing up, but to have that, to the biggest fuck you I can possibly give is to make something very successful and very beautiful out of all of this, and actually even funny, even combining the comedy element, because it is ridiculous. All of life is ridiculous, and we know that. We don't want to be taken too seriously. If I can't laugh at anything that happened, that would be impossible. I would just dry up and die, and I think a lot of people would. So I would just want people to be able to get the idea that expressing it is really the best possible way. Expressing it through anything remotely artistic, that's absolutely the solution for me, and I think for a lot of other people, which is why it makes me so happy that when they talk to me afterwards, they're honest and they're open about that, sometimes about how we've helped, and that is really, really flattering to think. I don't assume we have that much influence over anybody, but I'm glad if it happens. And how they're making their own clothes, they're baking muffins, they're drawing pictures and painting and writing poetry, and they show this to us, and that makes me so happy, because I know that they're healthier because of it, and I just want them to be okay. So it's a nice thing.
But you do inspire a lot of creativity in a lot of people, so...
If that is true, that makes me very, very happy.
I mean, I'm sure you read your forum.
Actually, I do it less than you would think, because I feel like I go and I do my journals and all of that, but I don't spend much time looking at most things. Occasionally, very occasionally, I'll pop on and just like have a little surprise, which is always kind of fun, is just like answer somebody's thing. But for the most part, I like to feel like it's their space. I don't want people to really feel like I'm there, that they have to censor themselves by, that they can't critique, that they can't, or talk about other things that are nothing related to me, which I think is actually the healthiest. And so I just want them to know that is actually their space. I've got my space, and I want them to feel like it's theirs. So I actually don't read that much. My real connection is seeing people at the shows and talking to them afterwards, which is why we try to do it, because that's really all I really allow myself.
How much were you involved with building your website or designing it?
I actually built everything on it, and I'm just so into the control of all of it that I need to. And only very recently have I been able to sort of delegate and ask for help and trust that there are people that will do a good job. And I've always felt the sort of thing of, even with I make all the costumes, I build all the sets, and even letting the girls help me with that. The crumpets recently has been a massive thing, and to realize they can do this, I can rely on people, has been a really nice surprise. It doesn't always work that way, such as when you trust your label or your manager or your booking agent, and they completely fuck you over and take all your money. That's a problem, and that really makes you afraid to trust anybody, but I think you have to. It's kind of like in love, which is, still the most powerful force in the universe, that if you're burned by something, which we have all been, you can choose to either just cut off that part of yourself that needs that and be safe, or keep putting yourself, that cosmic energy, out into the world of that.
I'd like to ask you something about Ophelia.
Very good.
Shalott is the most quiet song on the album, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
And it's based on a Tennyson poem.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
I study Victorian literature.
Oh my God, we could talk for hours. Oh God, that's so lovely. Yes, it is, and I think a lot of the kids don't realize it, and that's okay, but it's very, very faithful to that. And the reason why the funny thing is that's actually the oldest song on Ophelia. I used to perform that all the time, like 10, 12 years ago, when I was just playing in little, coffee house venues. And that was actually from the Enchant era. It wasn't on that record, but it was performed with that stuff when I did a lot of tours with that. And the reason for it was because pretty much virtually every song on Ophelia is about that type of woman that it's another drowning story, and the drowning is a metaphor for whatever, and the water and all of that, and the wanting your freedom so badly that you will get out of it in that way, even if it's death, because sometimes that is better. And so that was a perfect story of she is another Ophelia archetype. And I was just looking for those in my own life, in myself, throughout history, to try to build this sort of reality that this is a type. This is almost a medical condition. And not to really solve it, but just to say this is here, and this is me, and honesty. And so hers was another story about that. That's why I just was so gravitating towards it, is it was exactly what I was talking about, and the whole Shalott thing of this fight to stay alive, knowing that you need to break out, and knowing that that's actually going to kill you, but doing it anyway. So don't kill yourself, but, we understand the desire to break out so badly that you would do anything.
Did you know that it is often seen as a metaphor for the artist versus his audience, and the artist?
Yeah. Is that because that particular poem? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's almost funny that among all the songs, and I never expected this, because that song has so many words and it just goes on, and I often forget them. It's just really hard to keep track of everything. And it's so fast-paced. Literally everywhere that we have played on the planet, they have known in every language all of those words. In English, they faithfully sing it back to us every time, and that just shocks me that they know that. And that's why it's funny about the artist and the audience thing, is they're with me, they're singing it back, they're singing louder than I am, and that's just amazing that this song I wrote so many years ago, and that still fits exactly into my life and my world and my record, is still relevant to me, to them, and we can do it together. And that's a pretty damn cool thing.
Could I ask you just one more quick question?
Of course.
About selling your music on iTunes. Do you feel it as a good thing, or do you think the fans miss a lot of the creative process?
Well, the thing is that because of the lack of artwork and packaging and that, what I have found, I think it's a good thing. It's definitely a good thing in that a lot of people might not, it's a good introduction to, if you just hear somebody's name, what is the first thing everybody does, at least that I know? You go on iTunes and you see if they really exist, and you get a little snippet of what they do. You might buy that for $1 a song. I mean, it's incredibly cheap. That's one thing. And the other thing is you would probably go to a store and look for the actual packaging if you really, really liked that person. I do a lot of elaborate packaging on the records. I think that's what an audience deserves, and I want to share it, and I want to draw pictures, and I want to do all of that stuff. And so I think for people that are real fans, they want that, and they will go out and get it. And for the people that just download stuff, I mean, the thing is, digital is so massive right now, and record companies are just crashing and doing so badly that to try to fight that is a big problem. To accept that some people really do want the instant gratification of just, bam, there it is. I think it's very good, because ultimately any revenue I can get from that is what keeps the show going. I don't keep a penny of anything that I make. Everything goes back into the show, the records, our costumes, the sets, everything. So definitely it's a good thing. It's a good thing because digital versus recording, you know, physical is doing so well right now. But thankfully the fans, the real fans, still want the stuff in the packaging. So maybe they do both, or maybe we just get people turned on to that and then they move on to the real thing. So either way, I'm grateful for anybody who even listens, because I never really expected that that would happen. So either way, thank you. Thank you to everybody. Thank you for joining my mad, crazy world. Thank you for watching the shows. And thank you for attempting to understand all of this, because that makes me really, really happy. I'm very honored by it. So that is it. That's my story.
I guess it's much longer than that, but we'll have to end it. I feel.
No, but that was lovely, and thank you so much. That was so sweet. I really appreciate it, and I'm very, very flattered that you guys actually went to the trouble of looking into things, because a lot of people don't do that. So that was much more interesting than what I usually get to talk about. Much appreciated. Now, I'm going to go and set up my stage.